It's Wednesday afternoon, August 6th here in Korea. You're watching ARIRANG News. I'm Na Hyun-kyung, and these are the stories we're following at this hour. The U.S. government reiterates its position on the so-called comfort women issue. Washington says Japan's trafficking of women for sexual purposes in the 1930s and 40s was clearly a grave human rights violation. A three-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is holding. Officials from both sides are sent to Cairo for talks, with Egypt acting as a mediator. And the preparation committee for Pope Francis' visit to Seoul next week says the Pope will meet with the bereaved families and victims of the April ferry disaster. Now, our top story this afternoon, the U.S. State Department says Washington, as it said many times in the past, views Japan's wartime sexual slavery as a serious violation of human rights. Our Shin Se-min starts us off.
The United States is urging Japan to resolve the issue of its wartime system of sex slavery and take responsibility for its past atrocities.
We encourage Japan to continue to address this issue in a manner that promotes healing and facilitates better relations with neighboring states.
The State Department confirmed a report on Tuesday that White House and State Department representatives held closed-door interviews with Il-chul and Kang Il-chul, two Korean victims of Japan's sex slavery system, to discuss their experiences. Emphasizing that it wasn't the first face-to-face meeting between the women and U.S. officials, the spokesperson said Washington was open to holding similar meetings again in the future.
It is deplorable and clearly a grave human rights violation of enormous proportions that the Japanese military was involved in the trafficking of women for sexual purposes in the 1930s and 1940s.
Citing a spokesman at the U.S. National Safety Council, Korea's Yonhap News Agency also reports the two women met with the officials from the White House Office of Public Engagement. However, the names of the officials who met with the women have not been disclosed. Il-chul and Kang Il-chul are currently traveling around the U.S., taking part in memorial events remembering the victims of Japan's historical wrongdoings. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And over in the Gaza Strip, a 72-hour truce that went into effect on Tuesday continues. Israel has reportedly withdrawn all of its ground forces. Israeli and Palestinian delegates are set to talk in Egypt in an attempt to seek for a more permanent solution. Connie Lee has this report.
The gunfire has gone silent in the Gaza Strip as the 72-hour ceasefire continues. But the clock is ticking. With the truce set to expire Friday morning, Israeli and Palestinian officials have been sent to Cairo for talks, with Egypt acting as mediator. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, speaking to the BBC, urged both sides to negotiate a two-state solution. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, the three-day ceasefire is a brief window of opportunity for the residents to take in the devastation, stock up on supplies, and recover their dead.
We found destruction everywhere. A mosque, Quran books, decomposed children were found under the rubble after 5 days. Public buildings that used to serve people were destroyed.
UNICEF, the children's body of the United Nations, says more than 400 Palestinian children have been killed since the beginning of the conflict, with more than 140 schools damaged or destroyed in less than a month. Along with the truce, Israel said it has withdrawn all of its ground forces, but according to a military spokesperson, the troops are still on the border, ready in defensive positions.
We are taking a defensive stand. We are there in order to prevent further infiltration and further attacks from Gaza, originating from Gaza.
About a quarter of Gaza's population is now displaced, and more than 1,900 Palestinians have been killed in the month-long conflict. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Now, North Korea's conventional weapons may be falling in the hands of Islamist terrorist groups. According to U.S.-based website 38 North, it raised that possibility this week, saying Pyongyang seems to be using Iran as a logistical link in the chain. The report states that Pyongyang has a historical and possibly continuing arms relationship with non-state actors in the Middle East, namely Hamas and Hezbollah. British daily The Telegraph has also reported that Hamas is negotiating negotiating a new arms deal with North Korea. Weapons the two groups could buy from North Korea includes AK-47s and ammunition, artillery shells, rocket-propelled grenades, anti-tank missiles, and surface-to-surface missiles. And the UN Security Council has issued a fresh warning to North Korea. It said more ballistic missile tests will be met with harsh consequences. In a meeting Tuesday, Council members denounced the regime's recent launches and reminded that Pyongyang that they were in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. The Council did not specify the measures that would be taken, but they did raise the possibility of further sanctions if North Korea continues to flout its international commitments. North Korea has test-fired short-range ballistic missiles on 7 different occasions so far this year. And former North Korea specialist for the U.S. State Department Joel Witt says there are a number of reasons explaining North Korea's recent behavior, which is becoming more confrontational. We had a chance to talk to him. Our Yurian has this next report.
North Korea has recently been even more belligerent than usual, threatening to launch a nuclear attack on the White House and South Korea's presidential office of Cheongwade. Joel Witt, an editor of 38 North run by Johns Hopkins University, says a number of developments are prompting North Korea's actions.
There's, first of all, those North Korean threats. Secondly, there is what appears to be a deterioration in North-South relations. Third, you have the upcoming U.S.-South Korean exercises. And fourth, you have the Asian Games coming up as well. So all of these factors are in the mix, and the danger is the situation will deteriorate before the Games and result in some sort of provocation.
Seoul and Washington are scheduled to hold 2 weeks of joint military exercises in mid-August that are designed to bolster joint defenses against North Korea. When asked about Seoul's growing relationship with Beijing on the heels of a bilateral summit last month, Witt said it hasn't had much of an effect on Pyongyang's stance.
Chinese are still steering a middle course in dealing with North Korea, and they're not particularly supportive of either the United States or South Korea's stance towards North Korea. So I don't see any big changes coming out of that summit.
China's position on North Korea may not have changed much, but Witt says Washington should alter its stance towards Pyongyang. Citing a lack of any meaningful breakthroughs in U.S.-North relations despite years of efforts, Witt called for a new tact.
A new policy has to include diplomacy, such as engagement, but it also should include measures such as sanctions or even military steps to protect ourselves, because this is a very dangerous situation, so we need to use all of the above in dealing with North.
유리안 아리랑 뉴스.
And now moving on to the Ebola outbreak, concerns of the virus spreading to other parts of the world are growing. Health experts around the world are putting their heads together to get the Ebola outbreak in West Africa under control. Kim Min-ji reports.
The World Health Organization will convene a 2-day meeting of its emergency committee starting Wednesday. A spokesman for the UN Health Agency said the main focus for the experts taking part will be the Ebola outbreak in West Africa and whether it constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. If they determine it does, the committee will recommend that the Director General of the WHO declare it as such and that temporary measures are put in place to keep the virus from spreading internationally. The agency is scheduled to hold a press conference on Friday Geneva time on the outcome of the meeting. More than 1,600 have been infected in the current outbreak, and the death toll stands at 887. In the meantime, Spain is repatriating an elderly Ebola-infected Spanish priest who had been working in Liberia. An Air Force plane will pick up Miguel Pajares and bring him back to Spain for treatment. Pajares, who has worked in Liberia for over 50 years, has been in quarantine at a hospital in the capital. Meanwhile, a second American victim arrived on U.S. soil on Tuesday. Nancy Reipel was flown in from Africa overnight and will be treated in the same isolation unit as Dr. Kemp Brantley, who also contracted the virus in Liberia.
Both Ripple and Brownlee are reportedly recovering after taking experimental drugs. That is some of the world's leading Ebola specialists calling on the World Health Organization to make the experimental drugs available to victims in West Africa. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And with the Ebola outbreak front and center of most headlines in recent days, concerns that infectious diseases could spread to other parts of the world are on the rise. Our Kwon So-ah gives us a rundown of which diseases to watch out for before embarking on a trip.
No matter how slim you think your chances are of contracting a dangerous disease, prevention is always better than having to rely on a cure, especially as the world becomes smaller and people travel more. But even those who never leave the country can pick up something nasty, as there are more and more people catching contagious diseases in Korea. In fact, according to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, the number of measles patients this year stood at 410 as of the middle of last month. That's nearly 4 times more than the number recorded over the whole of last year. What's noteworthy is that only 14 of the 410 patients came down with measles abroad. Over 350 cases, the vast majority, caught it as a secondary infection in Korea. This is why taking the required vaccinations and medicine is so important. The most serious and contagious diseases are commonly found in Africa, the Americas, and Asia. The yellow fever vaccination is mandatory when traveling to any country affected by the viral disease, while all the others on the list are recommended. Malaria, for example, which is mainly transmitted by mosquitoes, can be prevented by taking anti-malaria tablets before, during, and after trips to affected areas. Unfortunately, there are still diseases that can't be prevented medically, as can be seen in the recent outbreak of the Ebola virus in Africa. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says basic methods such as washing hands thoroughly, eating cooked food, wearing long sleeves, and staying away from animals give travelers the best chance of avoiding getting sick. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Na Hyung-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. Now, Pope Francis will embark on his first trip to Korea as pontiff next week. He will stay here for 5 days and is said to have arranged a meeting with the victims of the tragic ferry accident that occurred in Korea back in April. Our Son Jung-in has the details.
This will be Pope Francis' first visit to Asia since his inauguration as pontiff in February 2013. Upon his arrival on Thursday, the Pope is set to meet with President Park Geun-hye. As for the rest of his schedule, he will take part in a celebratory mass in Daejeon, where he will meet with around 20 youth representatives from 17 Asian countries. He will also attend the beatification mass of 124 Korean martyrs who lost their lives mostly during the 19th century under severe religious persecution. The mass will be the largest event during the Pope's visit to Korea, held at Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul, with nearly 1,900 priests and some 200,000 Catholic faithfuls attending. The pontiff will meet with the Asian bishops in Hemi, located in the country's southwest region, followed by a concluding mass for the 6th Asian Youth Day. And Pope Francis is wrapping up his visit with a mass for peace and reconciliation in Seoul, inviting nearly 1,000 people, including former victims of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement during the early 20th century. The preparatory committee for his visit says he will also meet bereaved families and victims of the April ferry disaster upon the request of the bereaved families.
We delivered the message immediately to Rome and received a positive response. We will be inviting families of the victims to a mass held on August 15th.
The Pope is expected to give words of peace and healing, not only to the bereaved families, but the entire nation. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
The head position of the National Police Agency had remained vacant after its chief resigned over the agency's failure to promptly identify the body of Yu Byung-eun, the fugitive owner of the sunken Seoul-ho ferry disaster. But the position will likely be filled soon. The 7-member National Police Commission approved the government's recommendation of Kang Shin-myung, the current police chief of the Seoul Bureau, this morning and put him forward as a single candidate to President Park Geun-hye. Meanwhile, the chief of the army, General Kwon Ho-sung, also stepped down to take responsibility for his failure to adequately deal with the death of a young conscript who was bullied to death by senior soldiers. Kwon's position has yet to be filled. And that latest army bullying scandal has prompted a growing emphasis on the mental health of the Korean soldiers. A new study conducted by the Armed Forces Medical Command shed some disconcerting light on the matter. It shows that from 2011 to 2013, more than 19,000 soldiers visited army hospitals due to mental and behavioral disorders. More than 2,000 of them were diagnosed with anxiety disorders and had trouble carrying out normal everyday tasks. The number of soldiers diagnosed with panic disorders went up nearly 50% over that same period. Now, the recent slowdown of exports to China is setting off alarms for trade officials here in Korea, as China is Korea's largest trading partner. But the country's exporters may have found some unexpected help along the way. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The rate of increase in Korea's exports to China is slowing as local Chinese companies are producing cheaper products. Up until now, a majority of Korean exports to China were in the form of intermediate trade, goods in which the finished product is reprocessed and consumed in the import country. Steel, machinery, and petrochemicals fall in that category. It's why local media outlets in Korea have emphasized the need to diversify the country's exports to shift the focus toward consumer goods or products that can be purchased for use by the average Chinese consumer. Korean exporters have found an ally in its TV dramas. Food products, cosmetics, and beauty products from Korea have enjoyed increased demand in China thanks to the popularity there of Korean shows like You Who Came from the Stars and The Inheritors. The Korea International Trade Association says consumer goods to China from January to May this year increased more than 9% compared to the same period last year. Exports of seasoned dry seaweed, or kim in Korean, increased 300% in the first quarter after protagonists in Korean TV dramas were shown eating them. Likewise, exports of canned tuna increased 12-fold and Korean beer by 67% in the first quarter on year, promising signs for Korean industries who are trying to survive in the increasingly competitive global market. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
The world's two largest tech giants, Samsung Electronics and Apple, have decided to drop all of their ongoing patent lawsuits except the ones in the U.S. In a joint statement released on Wednesday Korea time, the two smartphone giants said the decision will apply to court proceedings in countries including Korea, Australia, Germany, Italy, Japan, and Britain. Although the statement also says the agreement has nothing to do with any licensing arrangements, some analysts say the two are on the path toward a cross-licensing deal. The high-stake lawsuits between Samsung and Apple began in 2011 when Apple claimed Samsung's Galaxy smartphone copied the design of iPhone. Samsung responded by accusing Apple of stealing its mobile technology. In the meantime, Samsung knocked Apple off its perch in the highly competitive North America smartphone market, thanks largely to robust sales of its latest flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S5. Market research firm Strategy Analytics says Samsung's share in the market came to 36% in the second quarter. Apple dropped to second place at 28%. Industry watchers said the turnaround came as Samsung strengthened its sales with the Galaxy S5, while Apple loyalists delayed purchasing new devices as a new iPhone is expected to be released later this year. Korea's LG Electronics ranked third in the region, posting a company record market share of 12%. And the Pope's visit to Korea is causing quite a stir, not just within the Catholic Church, but pretty much across the entire nation here in Korea. And as we said earlier, the Pope has a beatification ceremony planned while here, but there's one person not on the list, one person who many people hope eventually is added. And our Imuni joins me today again for more analysis on this story.
Good
afternoon.
Good afternoon, right? So An Jung-geun, he's considered a national hero in Korea, and he's known for the assassination of the then Japanese Resident General of Korea, Ito Hirobumi, and so he's actually a devout Catholic as well, and so he's known for his calligraphy works as well, and so they're hoping that the Pope would see some of his works and include him in the future. So take a look.
A heroic character in Korean history, Han Jung-geun sacrificed for the whole country when he took the life of the then Resident General of Korea, Ito Hirobumi. But what some don't know is that An also had an artistic side to him, seen in this sign preserved through the years. It's one of his last works, created while in prison, and reveals his devout Catholic faith, which he held on to until the very end. With the words "Respect of Heaven" written in traditional Hanja writing, An also wrote his name and left a handprint that's easily distinguished by his half-missing ring finger.
An Jung-geun was given the death sentence on February 15th, but before that, many Japanese individuals went to An requesting various different writings and signs.
And that's how this particular sign came to be. It was originally in the possession of a prison warden. It found its way into the warden's son's hands and was then returned to Korea from Japan.
An Jung-geun wanted more than anything to have peace in Asia, but he also always followed his faith, so this is actually a happy event.
Last March, the sign failed to sell at an auction, but recently the Seoul Jamwon Catholic Church bought it and then donated the piece to the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Seoul. And now it's being put on display in hopes of catching the attention of a very special upcoming visitor.
When the Pope visits this time, along with the beatification ceremony, An Jung-geun's life will hopefully be recognized and become a light for others.
The sign will be on display at the Seoul Museum of History and will be available for viewing just in time for Pope Francis.
So An Jung-geun is known for his other artistic works as well.
Right, so big calligraphy artist. He actually, interestingly, didn't actually study calligraphy, but he was very good at it. While in jail in Japan, he got many requests, like it mentioned in the report earlier, from the general guards there, or from just people in general asking him to create personal, calligraphy works for him. And so he was very successful at it. And in fact, some of his works are included in the National Treasure here in Korea.
And about the beatification ceremony, you said that An Jung-geun is not listed on the list yet, so do tell us more about that.
Right, so in 2011, the Archdiocese of Seoul included him on a list of potential candidates to be included in the ceremony, and unfortunately his status is a little bit controversial. So he is considered a national hero both here in Korea and in Japan, and in China, I'm sorry, but in Japan, he has a different status there, and so his current standing is a little bit unclear. So for now, we'll just have to wait and hope that he is included in the beatification ceremony later on, and we'll hope that the Pope checks out his calligraphy work this time around.
Okay. And the artwork that we saw in the report, that has the same theme or a similar theme with the
rest of the exhibition, right? So it's a very big exhibition that it's very timely for right now. The exhibition is called Ode to the West and East Small Gates, and so they are including other works all under the theme of, the Catholic here, especially in so they have a lot of dedicated to persecution of Catholics here in Korea, and so they are especially focusing on the Seosomun Park, where it's supposed to be one of the biggest martyr parks in the world, and so a lot of attention is on that. A lot of emotions are tied on that as well, and so they're really looking forward to the Pope's visit this summer.
Okay, so a very meaningful exhibition. All right, thank you very much, Uni, for your report today.
Always a pleasure.
Good afternoon. Well, we are in for another sticky day today, and the upper provinces will receive those pop-up showers until later this afternoon, while those down south will see rain later in the afternoon. And the heat wave advisory is still in place down south, with highs peaking in the 30s in most areas, while here in Seoul will remain below 30 degrees Celsius, rising to 28 this afternoon. But Daegu will soar to 34, while Gwangju and Busan will reach 32 and 30 respectively. And for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 30, and Dokdo should hit 28 this afternoon. Now, Super Typhoon Halong is making its way to north. It's forecast to shift direction toward Japan and to approach to Kyushu this weekend. But since this typhoon is so strong and powerful, it should have an indirect effect on Jeju and the southern coastal areas starting this Friday. Well, that's all for me today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
And that's all we have for now. I'll be back with more at 4 p.m. Korea time.